I grew up in the world of spirituality and ritual. I couldn't hold downward dog for 5 breaths. One day I got in a car accident and that kind of really shifted my life. I sat in ceremonies a lot and it was an epic portal in time. My entire body started moving like a phoenix, like a dragon. And then motherhood grounded me and brought me into a new frequency. For me, being a mother is something I always wanted. I could feel the energy moving through me. It was the ultimate Kundalini Kriya. The only way out is through. You can't stop it midway. You have to move through this. What I already knew was brewing is life is ceremony. My paintings are meant to be portals for remembrance, where you stand in front of these pieces and things get recoded in our system. Tap into your gold and stop looking at things as a victim.
Welcome to the Sageful Living podcast. Today I'm joined by Sharon Aluma. Sharon is a yogi, a yoga teacher, a talented artist, a mom, I would say a revolutionary, and just a beautiful spirit. So I'm so excited to have you here today. Welcome, Sharon.
Thank you. I'm so grateful to be here.
Would you like to tell the audience in your words a little bit about yourself?
Sure. My name is Sharon Aluma. I grew up in the world of spirituality and ritual. I've been blessed to be an artist and be able to allow that to be who I am. My parents, actually, my father left the pharmaceutical industry early on and decided to open up an educational toy and bookstore. So at the age of 4, I began working in this family business and just learning that rather than trying to sell something, all I have to do is share about my experience, and that allows things to evolve in how you quote unquote sell. It's more just about sharing experience. And I feel like that thread has been woven through my whole life. I found yoga in 2000 when I was in college at Maryland Institute College of Art. And there was a old carriage building growing up in Florida. Old carriage buildings didn't really exist. And there's a big yellow sign that said yoga, and my body said yes. And I just listened, and I couldn't hold downward dog for 5 breaths. And I went to the teacher. She happened to also be from Florida, those synchronicities. And I asked her, what should I do? And I was thinking she was going to give me like a formula. And she said, just keep showing up. And that's been another stamp in life of just keep showing up and the devotion to something. And the devotion is really something that moves through in the same way I sit at a canvas and there's a devotion of just like yes. And being a mother, there's a devotion of yes. There was a point in my life where I sat in ceremonies a lot, plant medicine ceremonies from 2013 to 2018. And it was an epic portal in time. And then motherhood grounded me and brought me into a new frequency where what I already knew was brewing is life is ceremony. And it really just nailed it home of all the wisdom is here. All the information is here. And it's really not my point in time to leave this planet. It's my point in time to live my scroll, my sacred scroll, but not to negate the work I did. There is definitely a blueprint to move through. And we all know about spiritual bypassing. So, but now I just feel very whole and holy and connected to God. And that is where I'm at in life.
That is amazing and a lot. And it brings up so many questions. Did you ever think about becoming a writer?
I'm an artist. So I would say painting is my core expression. And when I have time, that's what I do. I just started a Substack and I'm finally actually putting my writings out there. My father has been writing as long as I've known him, he's been writing. And there's a pattern there of it's not ready yet. It's not ready yet. And so there's something in my becoming where, okay, let me just open this Substack and just start putting it out there. That feels really awesome. And it's kind of this way of just showing up and knowing we're evolving, things are changing, and kind of here's me in my own evolution. And it feels really good to finally find a way to write and just put it out there without having to create a book or something so permanent. It feels a lot more fluid and fun, and we'll see what comes out of that.
I think that things like Substack will change writing. So maybe be that new place for people to share and to share free, you know? So when did you start painting? When did you find that medium?
I found it, I say, from birth. Again, I chose an amazing set of parents that knew to cultivate what our ultimate talent was. And for me, it was art, and my parents saw that. And so my dad started with me with this book by, I'm going to say his name incorrectly. I think it's Edward Chambly. Basically, this guy created this book where you could create anything and everything out of shapes, out of a circle that's a hole, and then you divide the circle and you can make a bird, a turtle, and all these different things out of this essence of the whole. And so at the time I didn't understand the metaphor of all that, but over time I did. And my father gave me that as the baseline, which now you can very much see in my art, which feels very special. But when I turned 11, at the age of 11, my father knew it was time for me to go to someone that has more skills within the world of art. And I started going every Saturday to a teacher, Peter Olson, and I would just sit in the studio the whole day and paint. Wow. It was really special. And again, looking back, he would have me copy artists. He would have me copy Monet and Rembrandt, anyone that spoke to me. And also I was obsessed with underwater scenes. It was just so magical to me.
That's the Pisces.
The Pisces water energy that my son also has. But again, over time, I realized wow, this is where I started to learn to channel from the masters and speak a different language that was learning from a different platform than just absorbing information. It was a different way of absorbing information, but it was really felt after in my becoming and recognizing and looking back in my timeline and seeing wow, the magic of that, the magic of that, the magic of that. The magic of that was one. Peter Olson was also a painter of the Revelations. He was a Christian artist. So to be around a spiritual human like that, of being around Christ consciousness and energies like that. And then also just getting to connect with these masters when they're no longer present on planet Earth physically. It's really cool.
There's so much magic in everything that you said. The fact that your parents supported this, a lot of people, their parents aren't going to support the arts because all they worry about is their children making money, so that's amazing to support you as an artist, as a child, to explore that. And then even that blood religions. I mean, your dad was Israeli, right? Your family is Jewish, and you just talked about at 11 years old, you were with a teacher that was more connected to Christianity and Christ consciousness. So that was so much openness from your family. And what I think is so beautiful is that you share that now with your son, and that you allow him to express himself and find his art or his passion, and I think that that's important for parents to foster creativity. I think creates a magical life. And maybe you won't become an artist that you do that for your living, but it's something that you'll always have to connect you back to yourself. So I'm really happy that your family supported that. So you went to college for art. Was that what you wanted to pursue? What kind of jobs did you have? I've known you for 14 years. When I first met you, you were a yoga teacher. Not sure you were selling your art or anything, but what other things did you try, or did you always kind of stay on this creative path?
In some ways, I always stayed on the creative path. So I went to art school. I studied environmental design, again, which is about designing space.
Is it outside spaces, environmental?
It's any space, outside, inside. My thesis was these beautiful, sustainable toys made out of felt that were about the essence of places that I visited while I was on my summer abroads during school, which I went to paint, landscape painting, and just immersed myself in these lands, and would be, from morning to night, just sitting there and painting and so content. And again, devotion. So out of college, I was in school in Maryland, and my body did not recognize the sun setting at 4 p.m. nor the
winter.
Snow or winter. And while seasons were lovely, I knew I was meant to be in warm weather. So it was either California or Florida, and my parents were still in Florida. So I came back here, and I knew I wanted to get to Miami. And so there's a store called Anthropologie, and at the time they were hiring 2 artists. One that did all the art inside of the space, the display that was creating the atmosphere and the environment. And the other one was more about the placement of objects and where they went. And so I was hired as the display artist, the one that got the little room in the back and got to make wondrous things, and really create these environments. And it really was so spectacular, and just, it just opened up so much for me in, wow, I can do this. This is a reality.
This can be a career.
This can be a career. And I'd be on a ladder, really tall, 12 foot higher. I don't know. It's like high ceilings. I don't know how I did it at the time. Drill in one hand, climbing the ladder, 7 a.m. And I loved it. And I was so happy. And then one day I got in a car accident, and that kind of really shifted my life. And I kind of got derailed off my path a bit. I went back to support my family and my family's business, but at the same time, I took a yoga teacher training.
I was going to say, from the car accident, I would think the fact that you had already had a yoga practice must have helped you in heal from that accident.
Yes. And that was a point of access of, it's time. Someone in college, when I was in college, you're like, come do the teacher training. And I was like, no, I'm an artist. I'm not doing this. And so it's interesting. I call those people like they're angels in our lives, right? And sometimes at that moment in time, I couldn't hear it, and then it evolved. And I ended up taking a teacher training in 2007, and slowly started teaching privates, and then eventually started teaching publicly. At some point, I began to work for Lululemon as well, when they were also still young.
Yeah.
There was just a showroom in Miami Beach, and I was part of that magic in creating community in this area we call Sunset Harbor, that was all warehouses and just starting to get, the walls knocked down and windows put in. And that's where I started teaching yoga publicly, was at a studio called Green Monkey. There was also something that my teacher shared with me, and he said, don't teach like me, teach like you, find you. And
I love that.
Yeah. And it really was like, well, what do I love? And through the car accident, it really got me into my body with curiosity of like, well, what is this muscle that I'm feeling? And what's this? And what's the bone? And I started to get really curious about inside the body and just the beauty inside the body. And, eventually we learn like, it's really the most epic piece of engineering that exists. The way that everything functions inside of us. And so that's where I began to teach was from a place of curiosity of like, what's inside of us? How are we working with the structure of our bones? What are you feeling? How are you breathing? And really at the core, I would say breath was such an important marker. And on my own journey, I would say breath is something that came through my Ashtanga practice, my Mysore practice. And Ashtanga is what I started with in 2000. And my Mysore practice really I finally stepped into that scary place. It was a scary place for me to be like, wow, no one's going to tell me what to do. And I just do it. And I have to just like be and remember. And I really started my Mysore practice during my time period with medicine, with plant medicine. And my Kundalini awakening, the one that I experienced, it's obviously like an evolution, but the moment of embodiment of it was on my yoga mat, in my Ujjayi breath. And even now as I evolve, it's when I'm speaking, when I'm being, my presence is in my breath. And we have these breath practices of holotropic breathing and moving through parts of ourselves big parts and big trauma, but it's like, where is the everyday and where is the everyday essence? And I find yoga really speaks to that. And then beyond that, within yoga, where our bodies are going into geometry. So it ties me all the way back into my childhood where I learned to draw from geometry, and my art now, that's geometry. And triangle pose is also the first geometric form to hold form. It's the least amount of sides needed to hold form. So we're in these postures and we're channeling energy. We're actually with Mother Earth and Father Sky, and we're breathing into that magnitude, which is evolved from a state of being of like, okay, 3 more breaths, warrior 2, I can do this. I can do this. It's more of like, wow, the brilliance of this. I'm holding the presence of this posture. I'm embodying this posture. What am I receiving from this? What am I giving through this? And I feel like that is really where other parts of us start to awaken, and this game of life, for me at least, becomes fun because there's a playfulness to it. And it's not just holding on for dear life to get it over and done with. It's what else and what's going to come through. And that's really kind of what excites me now in this moment in life.
And everything you just said, I think, is what makes you such an excellent yoga teacher. For me, I'm always looking for teachers that are more embodied and not a studio where they're following a routine. So Sharon mentioned a lot of different things about yoga and a lot of different modalities about yoga. And I think that's really important for our audience to hear. You said Ashtanga, Mysore, Kundalini. There's so many different types of yoga. And it's come up before on the podcast about yoga teacher training, not to become a teacher, but for self-development, for transforming yourself.
I just really want to also say, not everyone is meant to be a yoga teacher. Everyone can take a yoga teacher training. I think it's something really beautiful because for me, I really saw yoga evolve. When I started, it was like only Ashtanga was available. That's why I didn't go to Vinyasa. And at a certain point, I was kind of like, these yoga teachers, like they're not here for the spirit. They're here for the physical. And then eventually I realized in my own soul, in meditation, it was like, Sharon, this is what you always asked for. You wanted the world to awaken to this energy. And I see yoga as a blanket of energy. And while some people might step into this work through the physical, right? And it might first be like, I'm showing up, I'm looking good, I'm doing this stuff. Eventually something deeper might come through. So for us to judge someone or something on their container is our disillusion.
So it's like, don't be afraid of yoga. Know that there's so many different styles of yoga out there. And you talked about a Kundalini awakening. So that has not come up yet on our podcast. Do you want to go into a little bit what you meant to that? Because Kundalini awakenings, we know, can happen anywhere, anytime. It's not just through Kundalini yoga, which is a practice that Sharon and I are both trained in and use a lot in our lives. But a Kundalini awakening can happen spontaneously. So can you explain a little bit more about your Kundalini awakening, what that looked like or felt like, and what that meant in your journey?
Yeah. I'll say I want to highlight what it felt like, because that's embodiment. And that's where I feel like I was really able to tune into that experience and be present in my body as it was happening. So I said it was a 2-day experience. Really, the core of it was a 2-day experience. And the first day, I was on my Ashtanga Mysore mat and doing my practice. And I just started to breathe into every cell of my body, not in any, it was an intuitive knowing. It was like, okay, just breathe. And I felt this tingle throughout my whole system. And it was really epic. And that was the experience of that practice. And so the next day, you're up at 5:30. I get onto my mat at 6 a.m. And I was like, okay, let's do this. And for the first 30 minutes, I'm like, just breathe into every cell. Just breathe into every cell. And I was trying to control this experience and mimic it and make it happen again and repeat it because it was such a high for me. And after about 30 minutes, I was like, I can't. Like, this is distracting me. I'm not present. I am trying to cultivate something. And I let go of this thing that I was trying to do. And within moments, my entire body started moving like a phoenix, like a dragon. And I could feel it all the way from the tips of my toes to the crown of my head. And I was in movement, but it was just this circular movement. And I could feel the energy moving through me. And that was really my first Kundalini awakening. I had a second experience working with one of my mentors in New York, and he does body work. And that same experience of every cell vibrating came through. And this time it was every cell boiling. And I got really excited and I was there. I actually didn't get really excited. Every cell was boiling. I was very present in the experience. And then I went into the space of the infinite, of everything and nothing. And it was gray matter. It wasn't all light. It wasn't all dark. And then I got really excited and felt like I arrived. And there was so much contentment inside of me. And then in that almost grasping and excitement, it went away. And then I was like, no, just go back into the presence of every cell bubbling. And so I just went back into the feeling and sensation of that as opposed to trying to contrive it like I did the first time. And within moments, I was back. I wasn't in that same place that I wanted to get of everything and nothing, but the table started to shake. And there were these giant beings starting to work on me, these otherworldly beings. No psychedelics. This was just life unfolding. And this was also, really, I'm just recognizing in this moment as I share, it was another moment of a Kundalini awakening. And so I suppose in that, it doesn't mean once we have this Kundalini awakening, we're done. And I think that's something really to note I think we've both experienced this. For me, at least, in the beginning of this process, I was like, okay, I'm going to do this, 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 and then I'm going to be done, and I'm going to be arrived, and I'm going to be enlightened, and I'm not going to have to worry about any of this stuff anymore. And I will say it's been a really fun experience of like, no, it never ends. It gets easier. We're better at surfing these waves. We become, more skilled and we can ride bigger waves. And to me, that's enlightenment because the whole system is lightening up. There's a lightness to who we are and there's a gentleness with ourselves. At first, I was really hard on myself. I was like, oh my gosh, you've been doing this for years and like, who are you? And blah, blah, blah. And now I see something. I'm like, ooh, okay, let's see this. Let's be with this. Like, let's love this. Let's cherish this. Let's honor this and thank this. And in the same way you tapped on, we choose our parents. I think there's even, I know, and I just wrote something yesterday I published on Substack about this, that there's a process to this we chose. And for me, it's like through the portal of parents that really helped me recognize it, but it might be through an ex-lover or anything. And at first it's, I chose you. And then it's, why did I choose you? So questioning. And so for me, I was like, wow, I'm really smart. Why did I choose you? And I went from this blaming into this place of like, wow, okay, I chose you because I needed this and I needed this. And that's why I'm able to share about my wholeness, because our parents are part of our life. And then eventually we portal into this space of like, my parents did the best they could.
Yeah, family constellations, our parents, their one job was to bring you to this earth.
Yes. And so
and there is, as being a mother now, which we'll get into, there is no rule book.
There is no rule book. And so this mantra of my parents did the best they could felt really good. And then more recently, I had someone close to me say to me, you're just doing the best job you can with Samuel. And they meant it as a compliment, but it really hurt me. 2 weeks prior, I had a friend say to me like, wow, you're doing such an amazing job with Samuel. You can see it. You can feel it. He's incredible. And so almost right away that day, it was like, I don't want to say that about my parents anymore. And eventually, within a few months, it was finally vocalized to my father, really, of just like, wow, thank you for being the exact Abba that I needed. And I sent that message to him on Father's Day, and it unlocked physically, I felt it, the vibration of new codes of just like this excitement and celebration of life, as opposed to like, oh, they did the best they can. Because while they did the best they can, they also did an awesome job on me, and I'm so happy to be me. And it's something I do share with my son from the beginning. I was like, thank you for choosing me. Thank you for making me a mama. And it's already in his language. It's like, I chose you. And he says it to his dad, and his dad kind of like laughs at it a little bit, but he takes it in, because it really just feels like taking ownership.
I was just about to say, it gives you the power.
Yes.
It's the power of choice. This just didn't happen to me. My soul chose this. And that might be hard for some people to hear when they've suffered a lot of trauma in their childhood, that what do you mean I chose to be abused, right? But there are lessons that your soul needed, and hopefully this podcast can help you see that there are other ways to look at things. There are other ways to accept things in your life, and there are healing modalities and people to help you see these things so you can accept them and let them go and not stay in a victimhood of what had happened to you. You know, we can't, it's not that we blame ourselves either. It's not, it didn't happen to you because you did something wrong, but be able to see the lessons and be able to evolve and grow. And that's what we're here for, is to evolve, to grow, for our soul to get to a next level, you know, and to live in embodiment. That is just the one word with you that just keeps resonating through my whole being, is you really do embody everything that you have learned and all the lessons. And I'm sure there are days that are, you know, you don't feel your best and you don't feel great and you're not in that high and light, but that's why we keep moving forward and we keep coming back. And Kundalini, by the way, Kundalini awakening, Kundalini is an energy. You know, it's your creative energy, it's your sexual energy, and it lays dormant at the base of your spine. So when we're talking about a Kundalini awakening, it's that energy. And, you know, Sharon talked a lot about feeling it in her body, because she was feeling that energy rise through her body and fill her whole body up. And there are people that have a spontaneous Kundalini awakening, and in the regular Western world, they're going to think maybe that person is crazy, because if they don't know how to process this and ground themselves back in, they may seem like they're in a psychotic state, but it could really just be that energy rising.
Yeah. And I really see the sanctuary as that. It's like this refuge, this place for, you know, people do go through these experiences. And I'm so grateful I had my yoga practice before I moved through any plant medicine. And I had tools, and, you know, I've studied many different paths and energetics, and we've been doing this work together. So I really feel like what you're creating here is this place for people to get curious and ask and be like, okay, I'm going through this experience, and, you know, where's my next, where can I go? You know, there's so many modalities to connect to, and you don't have to connect to every single one, right? And so it's really nice to have you as this guide, and here just sharing on the podcast of like, here's a bunch of different experiences and what awakens inside of you as you hear this. And then, do you need help to navigate this? I'll send you to the right place. And also, you're a genius in your own being of what you're sharing. We all have this sacred scroll inside of us of like, what is our full embodiment? What are we here to walk on this planet and share? And for me, it does feel very much like embodiment and creativity. We're born with a unique code of what we're here to share. And for me, my art was at the very core allowed and received and remembered. But for a lot of us, we forget what that is. And listen, it also doesn't have to be in a container like the yoga teacher, the artist. It could be someone that's opening up banks, right? Someone that's in something, but it's the way that they're alchemizing with the world and others and how they're showing up as a human being. And all of us have these different roles, and discernment is really the pivotal point. And so going back to the scroll, perhaps that scroll ties into discernment and clarity. And as this world evolves, and as all these new technologies are coming in, like AI, where things are being created that we think is outside of reality because it's not in this physical form, but it's just inside another reality called AI. What we are gifted as humans is free will and discernment. And the discernment is knowing in our body. Again, this is why I feel like the intelligence of the body is so important. Yeah. What do we feel? What feels like a yes? What feels like a no? What do we feel? Is this true? And we have to almost get deep into this work, because I really feel like 5-10 years from now, we know the world's going to be very different. And how are we going to know truth?
What's real and what's not real? Yeah, you know, there's so much there with the breath. And what it made me think of is so many people, they're in their head and they need to get in their heart and into their gut. And they can be in the 3D world. They can be working high corporate jobs or doctors or whatnot, but that doesn't mean they can't have this too, and embody this and still live in that life in that world. And I do like that there's so much more yoga today. And I love that you touched upon, because I judge myself sometimes, the power yogis, and it's these type A's. I saw this a lot when I lived in New York. They were the go, go, go corporate people. They were there to survive. They were there to be successful. And then they would do something like a power yoga class just for the workout. But when there's that teacher that can give them the workout and give them that centeredness and give them the breath and give them that Shavasana is the most important pose in yoga. And there would be some people that would run away and they'd leave before Shavasana. And the whole thing of yoga, the point of yoga is to prepare the body for meditation. So to just take that 1 to 5 minutes that they give you and let what your body just experienced to integrate into the body, I feel like that could bring more into people's lives. So they can be this big corporate people and just go to a yoga class and just let your body be. And I think that yoga as well, and even if it's that crazy power yoga, can become a meditation. I know so many people say to me, I can't meditate. I can't sit still. And I say to them, there's so many different ways to meditate. When you get into a flow, or I always recommend people, and I have to learn this guy's name. It's the Buddhist monk, Tang Tak. But one thing he says is a walking meditation. And you pick a color and go outside. And as you walk, you look for it. Now, obviously not green. There's a lot of green. But I remember one day I picked pink. And it was like, oh my God, there's a pink fire hydrant. I'd never seen that before. Wow. Because I was focused on that color. Or there was spray paint in the ground, on the ground with pink. So it's like bringing you into presence. I love how your yoga practice and your teachings have evolved through everything else that you have done. It really comes through in the classes that you teach. And that's why you've changed yours from a yoga class to a yoga ceremony. And being in class with you is being in ceremony, because you give such wisdom, more than just for the body, but for the mind and the soul. So I appreciate that. And thank you for that. Now, let's talk a little bit about that and incorporating this stuff into the world. I asked you to send me some information about what you wanted to talk about. And one thing that stood out that you mentioned was being able to combine the spiritual world and the material world. And there doesn't have to be separation, because I think there are some people out there, and the people are going to judge them. They're too woo-woo. They're wearing these hats and costumes, and they're not in reality. But you and I both know that there is a way to be in both. Just because we are spiritual and embodied and in these practices doesn't mean that we don't like nice things, and doesn't mean that we don't want a Gucci bag. It's not saying that it has to be one or the other. We don't have to give up everything and walk barefoot through earth. We can be these spiritual beings and be in the real world as well.
Yeah. I really tapped into that truth when I decided to try on, and I'm going to say try on, as even when we talked on choosing our parents and that, I think everything is try it on, see what it feels like and experience it. So I tried on this experience. I decided to go with one of my dear friends and teachers, Ganesh, to Guatemala for my Kundalini yoga training. And we were up a mountain that was a 45-minute hike up a mountain. There was no other way to get there. I had a bed with like a wood bed with a basic mattress. And it was kind of my way of like playing with what would it feel like to live like this monk style where you don't have many things. And the training was epic and beautiful. And to the clarity of, there was one day I went down the mountain and I was like, okay, you deserve a good meal. And I had warm curry, and I got back up the mountain and basically right away threw up. And it was a message of like, no, right now you're in a clearing. And that was kind of what I was going through physically and emotionally, just like letting go of a lot. And I just was on chia seeds and papaya and things of that nature. But what I came to realize at a certain point was I like a comfortable bed. And while this was an experience I wanted to try on, and it's an epic experience as part of the story of my life, it's not who I am. And I really got to come into my truth and start to realize like, no, I want certain comforts, and it's not, I started to finally let go of the idea of spirituality had to look like something. Because I fully dove into the experience of like, we were like little monks up there with our cacao and this is where I learned about cacao, and it was so beautiful, and I'm so grateful. But I'm so grateful to be here and, loop it back into motherhood. Like, for me, being a mother is something I always wanted. I have to say that.
So let's get into that, because you became a mother, and it wasn't like you're like, okay, I'm with a partner and I'm going to get pregnant. Like, people plan their children. That wasn't the way it was for you. And I think maybe it's not even looking in the family aspect of how you maybe wanted your life to be, expected it to be. So let's talk about your path into motherhood and your amazing son, Samuel.
Yeah. Ugh, the feeling, right? The feeling. And I would say, to start with,
it wasn't an initiation you were looking for at the time, and it found you.
In some ways, it was an initiation I was always seeking. I always wanted to be a mother, but I wasn't working in the timeline that exists of, okay, you meet your partner, you date, you get married, you have a kid, you get the house, you this was where it was a moment, I guess, of hyperspeed. And I met someone, we were dating for 6 months, and I got pregnant.
How old were you?
38.
Okay.
Yeah, 38. And I had to go through a lot, and I used family constellations to find the finality of, I was waiting for God to come down and tell me what to do. And I really learned about choice and free will in that moment, and actions, and how our actions are our choice. And yeah, I really feel so grateful. There was definitely, my story isn't typical, but it's familiar to some. What I know is that there was a grieving process of letting go of the idea of what family is going to look like.
Yeah.
I really had to grieve that as a woman, and allow that time and space to grieve that, right? And that's where we talked about, you can't spiritually bypass, you can't just try to, force your way into the next step. There's processes. And I will say, yeah, that so the grieving process around that. But while I was pregnant, there was still, we were together and all these beautiful things. And my son's father is a beautiful man, an open heart, tons of light. It just wasn't our alchemy. We have different ways of being. And there's a lot to that, right? Because you do the mirror work and you try and you try and you try. And at a certain point, there is a recognition of like, okay, I need to actually just step out of this at this point.
And I've had a few friends in this situation.
Yeah. So going back to, for me, and again, it's not, I know within your timeline, for you, the process in becoming a mother wasn't birthing a child. But I will say for me, in birthing a child, to just share the experience, it was the ultimate Kundalini Kriya. It was the ultimate literally walking through the fire. There's literally this feeling. I did a home birth. There is a feeling of a ring of fire as you're birthing the child, and the only way out is through. You can't stop it midway. You have to move through this.
Did you do a water birth?
We ended up doing a water birth. The water really let my muscles and bones just melt, which was really nice. I had a very easy pregnancy, and I loved it. I was dancing. I did a Kundalini postnatal training at the time also. I did a lot of things. I realized in the moment, I was like, this experience is never going to happen again. I'm never going to be pregnant again without child as my first experience.
Right.
And so I embraced it fully and enjoyed it. What we have is called a golden hour after the child is born, where we don't cut the umbilical cord right away. We let the blood work back into, and the child to get the last bits of receiving from the placenta. And in those hours, it was the wisdom of, there were all these modalities created, like Kundalini yoga, like family constellations, like all these different things. But this is the ultimate. This is the embodied experience of all these systems that I have that I put myself through to reach a certain point. Then my son came through and it was grounding. It was like this recognition. And I realized I have to be fully present for this child. I can't be flying high, right, on mushrooms and be with my son. Now listen, I know there's a movement, Moms on Mushrooms, which is about helping women move through depression with mushrooms. And I think that's beautiful.
But there can be a point of escapism.
There can be a point of escapism. I'll also say that specific medicine for me goes into my belly, and I don't have the time to process it as a mother. And so that exact experience of like, oh my gosh, this, and I don't have time to do my breath work and all this, I need to be there for my son, was like, put this down for me, for my journey, for my path, right? Put this down. And the alchemy of being a mother and the interaction is everything to me. And the joy, and the more I just fall into his world and he falls into my world. What I know now is even in being a single mother, there's a state of being, it's where it's like, he's along for the ride. There's no like, oh, you know, I'm going to go to this while he stays with dad for the night. And his father is still around and present, and a good father. I want to make sure like that's spoken. But I'm the primary caretaker.
Yeah. You guys aren't living together. He's not there. It's not a split thing like that. And you don't have split custody where there's certain days or everything, you know, so you are a single mother. Yes. And Samuel is a very big part of your life. And what I love about my community here is my friends that have had children is to see their children at the events, to see them a part of what we're doing and not separated, you know, because their exposure to this is helping them to become who they're meant to be as well. So I think that's beautiful. I want to go back, you know, your natural birth, your birth at home. Now, my audience might hear this and be like, that's crazy. You guys have to understand, women didn't have babies laying down on a bed with their legs propped up. Over here in the corner, I have a birthing chair from the 1800s. And a woman would be sitting in this little stool with her legs open for the baby in a natural position. So I hope that out there, the audience can't judge these natural births and these at-home births. I think that it's what used to always be. And yes, I have spiritual friends who tried to have their babies at home and because of medical things had to go to the hospital. So thank God for the hospitals.
Yeah. And I will say, so I gave birth March 2020, which was, you know, a COVID. My midwife, who I just reconnected with, she's amazing. She grew up on a farm for midwifery. And she's back there now, but she kind of helped me understand. She's like, it's interesting. There's a lot of women now calling about doing a home birth. And she's like, they're not really prepared. And again, I think it's a lot of this work helps prepare us for this feeling of like, I can birth a child on my own. It's not for everyone. I have friends that are in this world and they're like, no, I need to go to the hospital and I need
the security.
Right. And so there's no shame in how we choose to birth our children. For me, I'm scared of fluorescent lighting and hospitals. And it felt so good to be able to do this at home. And, you know, the fun experience was like the embodiment and all the work that I did.
Who was there?
It was my midwife, her assistant, and my son's father. I didn't want a big crew. I wanted to be very free in that moment. And so, yeah, and my midwife also, it almost felt like a free birth. I just shared this with her. I remember she was sitting on the toilet, like lid closed, obviously, but sitting there, and she was just holding this space in meditation for me. And I did use my Kriya. There was a point where I was curious about pushing, and I asked, what about pushing? It felt like the baby, it wasn't like I need to push this baby out. It was like, I feel this baby coming through. And she just told me to inhale and hold it and then push. And so every inhale, I would inhale sat into my third eye, and every push would be nam.
Wow. How long were you in labor?
not that long. My water broke so I started having contractions around like 4 p.m. We ended up going to the ocean. I lived right across the street from the ocean. And I had friends that told me like, you'll have contractions for days. And I was like, okay, here we go. But I was like, no, just be with it. Cat cow was my ultimate gift. Like wow. Just being in cat cow was literally the waves moving from the contractions. And the contraction is an opening, right? As much as it's like this, it's a pulsation and a frequency. And we haven't even touched on sound and frequency. But by, I think it was 8 a.m. or 10 a.m. 8 a.m. I think it was that my water broke. And we were hysterically laughing because my son's father was like, maybe you should put a towel down or something. I was like, no, it's going to take a few days, And
then it happened.
And then it just happened and we were hysterically laughing and a towel wouldn't have done anything. And then by 10 a.m. my midwife arrived and by 1:37 Samuel was born. Wow. Yeah. I really made sure I didn't listen to people's stories that were like hard, or I really kept in a vibration. I listened to this audiobook called Orgasmic Birthing. I mean, there's this, I would say for me, what happened is there was a clear initiation of, again, the fire, the ring of fire, and you can only walk through the fire. And to be able to feel in my physical body, I knew that that's part of my being in this lifetime, is so much of like the physical embodiment. It's actually in my gene keys as well. And so, again, this is my alchemy, right? And so everyone needs to find their alchemy. What's their sources? What's their brilliance? What's their scroll? And not think that like, oh, that's me. Sure, try it on if you want. But yeah, it's orgasmic in like what it gives us as women, that it shows us what's possible and really what we're capable of. And I think that ties all the way back into this 4-step process that I just wrote about, where we go to blame, we go to, these different places. And then eventually we're just like, this is my vibration. This is my frequency. This is what I'm living. This is my free will. So I lived into my free will and I birthed my baby naturally, and we did it together. And I've only been blessed with one child to date. And I have this pondering of the alchemy of child and mother. And is it all mother? I really feel like there's an alchemy between the child and mother and the child's essence and how they actually want to be birthed. I was a breached baby, and it feels very much tuned into who I am, of like, let me do this my way. Let me try this on. Let me see, which other way I can do this. And, I was C-sectioned, and after postpartum with my son, we were doing some osteopathic work, and my mom ended up coming with me so she could be with my son because I was getting worked on as well. And there was this beautiful thing happening where my mom was remembering and recalling stories where she could never really recall certain things. And she's like, I tried birthing you naturally, but then you were breached, and the doctor said I needed to do this. And the osteopath said, your mother could have died in the process, and you could have died in the process. And sure, there's certain women who might hold a field of like, no, I can birth a breached child, but that wasn't the alchemy of my mother and me, right? Like that was not what was meant to be. There's so much information out there, and they want to tell you, oh, if you're not birthed naturally, then there's this certain process that your body is not squeezed. And there's a lot of shame happening, as opposed to just ownership of like, this is what happened and I'm grateful and this is awesome and I am who I am and I'm brilliant. And if I could share anything through this podcast, it's that. Tap into your gold and stop looking at things as a victim.
What's coming to me from what you're saying is it's trusting yourself. Like you said, there's so much information out there, but you're right. It's what is right for you. Stop listening to the naysayers. Stop listening to the squawkers, and do what's right for you, but to be able to step into that, and that's what I hope that we can do here, is help people to accept themselves and step in, and to be able to say, if people are like, oh my God, you're doing that, you're having a C-section, and say, yes, because this is what's best for me. And let the clutter go behind. Let the chatter happen without them taking it in.
Yeah.
There's so much information out there, I think, to cloud us. So it is really that inner knowing and trusting yourself especially when it comes to childbirth and your child.
Yeah.
Because there's so many people that are out there to tell you what's right and what's wrong.
Totally.
You know, so you become a mother for a reason. You have to be able to trust yourself. And there is no rule book to becoming a parent, you know, so you have to trust yourself, and you can never, I hate when people say, I don't hate, but people say, I would never do that. I would never harm my child. I would never do that. I'm not going to mess them up. Of course you are. They're their own soul. They're their own path. And you can't always, you're going to, as their parent, think you know what's best for them. There is going to come a time where it's not, and that's okay, because they have their own path to lead, and they are their own soul to create their own life as well. You're here to guide them, but at some point, you know, yeah, you're going to do something wrong, because that's life. And maybe for one kid, it'll be the right thing, and for a different kid, it's going to be the wrong thing, and that is okay, because that's just part of life.
Right, and each have their own sacred scroll, and skull,
and soul,
and soul. You know, so there's a piece that you spoke to, and I want to loop it back into, like, we're all going through our own work, and, you know, again, we said our parents are doing the best they can, right? But with my son, I'm growing too. And, you know, there are moments where I just have lost my shit. Yeah. And we communicate with language, and he's like, that scared me. I'm like, I'm so sorry, buddy, that I scared you. I didn't mean to scare you. I'm sorry. I've taught him about being hangry. I've taught him about being frustrated. And I've learned in the process of, instead of going to that point of blowout, I'm like, buddy, I need a little space right now. I'm getting really frustrated. It's not about you, but I just need a moment of space. And he's become really good at communicating his emotions and feelings too. And there's also a space of letting him witness my evolution of, like, wow, I'm so sorry, buddy. I'm working on that. And I'm going to keep working on that and growing into that more. So he recognizes that I'm not sitting here also as the guru, as the parent looking down. And while I am holding a very safe space for him, I also want him to know that I'm growing too. I'm not hiding behind this facade of guru. I'm living and breathing and being a human and being the alchemy of us. I'd really love to just wrap things up with sound and art.
And frequency. Now, I am a sound healer because of you, I would say. I mean, when we look back in the last 14 years, Sharon, you took me to my first plant medicine ceremony. You were the first one where I ever saw a sound bowl, you know, and introduced me to being able to play sound bowls myself, you know, and believing in myself of doing things like that. So thank you for all of that. So I know sound is really important to both of us. The love, our hands are connected to our heart. They're an extension to our heart. So when I play the bowls or I do sound healing, I am using the healing in my hands through the tools that I have. So yeah, please talk about frequency and sound healing and what it's meant to your life and maybe how you got into it.
Yeah. So sound came to me through yoga, really. There's a beautiful man, Andrew Clark, who plays crystal sound bowls, who really has a very beautiful ear. But for me, it was my father coming back from India and bringing back a bowl for me, a metal bowl, a Tibetan bowl.
What?
Yeah. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to bring it to yoga class. And I brought it to yoga class, and in the 5-minute shavasana, I decided to just play that bowl instead of touching everyone with my hands. And at that time, it was almost, I needed to. The room was packed. It was sweaty. I wasn't really at that point walking around anymore. But what happened was that after, I had at least 5 people come up to me and be like, what was that? What happened? And I was like, oh, it's this magical bowl my father brought home for me. I've kind of let other people try to play it. I realized that there's something innate in me that was meant to work with this instrument and work with sound. Now, I also know, just as I've spoken to yoga taking over the planet as a blanket, I do see sound having that same essence and energy, and we're going to see more people playing with sound and using sound in Shavasana. And it is frequency, and frequency is the master language. We say, what's the universal language is our heart and our heartbeat. And that's, when we travel, it's that's where we speak from. When we're trying to communicate, when we don't speak the language, we're kind of making these hand gestures and we're speaking in a way from our heart and gratitude. And sound is that. What I do know from also what I've heard is people are like, wow, your sound is so different, but why and how? And I realized sound doesn't lie. And so, yes, we are these vehicles from our heart into our hands. But just to know that, again, we're all on this journey. Take your steps. Don't try to bypass. Truth is spoken through sound, and you can't bypass it. And so if someone's there playing the crystal bowls that hasn't necessarily done the depth of inner work that we have, the frequency is going to emit differently. It doesn't mean that they're not amazing and awesome. It just means that that's the point of their journey that they're on. And there are people that are actually still just starting to come in. And so not everyone's meant to go to these master facilitators. There's steps to get to these places. And if they do, amazing, right? But there's a place for everyone. But I do know that frequency is the discernment. And that's how we're going to know. It's the feeling. And to me, it's everything. It's like to be able to feel those frequencies. It's the wordless, right? It's what you can't put into words. And for me, it's also on another plane dimension. It's my art. And my art is really where I place all of this, the frequencies, the embodiment, the discernment, all of my essence and soul goes into these paintings, and they are meant to be portals for remembrance, where you stand in front of these pieces and things get recoded in our system. And for me, it feels like the ultimate place because, you've seen me on my journey. I was teaching like packed classes, 50 plus people, speaking wisdom. Again, the beauty of yoga for me was, okay, I had to remember these asanas. So my mind got out of the way. And then you learn how to channel because your mind is out of the way because it's focused on something else. And over time, we evolve. And for me, I still teach once a week. I still teach privates. I'm working on projects to maybe bring it to more of a global platform. Let's see what births. But the truth is that my paintings hold all of this. And it's wordless. And it feels so epic to be able to pour all this information to a place without words and to just feel. And often people look at my paintings and they're like, they can't walk away. And that's almost what I want. I don't want, there's a place of me of like, I don't want to create the paintings that people just pass by. Now listen, some people might just pass by because they can't handle all the resonance that's in a painting of mine. But really it's that quality of sitting and meditating and being and you touched on meditation, and yeah, yoga prepares us for meditation to be able to sit comfortably, right? And to sit with the upright spine and to allow the energies to move. There's also a place of being prepared for conscious death. Shavasana you touched on. I honestly feel like it's the most important posture, and I share now Shavasana more than at least 10 minutes in a class. And when I'm in my personal practice, it's often 30, 40, an hour if I have the time. And in that place, it's the frequency, and it's the resting. It's like the Sabbath, right? Shabbat. And it's the place of rest.
Yeah.
And to allow something beyond our spectrum to come in, to allow something beyond our point of access to come in complete surrender, there's something more brilliant that can start to move through us that's beyond our understanding. Yeah. And our knowing and our vision. And when I'm painting, that's what I feel. It feels like in the same way I taught and all these messages would come through, I'd be like, my jaw would drop sometimes at the things I would say. I'm like, what? It's like orgasmic, right? But I don't have it written down. I don't have it like anything like that. And so it's in my system. It's coded inside of me. And my paintings are now that presence. And that's how I am bridging the etheric into the earth.
into the reality.
into the reality.
You know, what was coming to me is meditation and art. Like we said before about people say they can't meditate. Sit in front of a painting like yours and just look at different pieces of it. And every time, you know, you're getting out of your head and you're in that visual. And when you said it was a portal, I feel like that's what it is. I mean, I could stare at your art and see different things every time and feel different things every time. That can be a form of meditation. And I feel your pieces are like that for people to be able to experience. Like you said, you don't want it to be a piece of art that just walking by. It's a piece of art that maybe they're going to sit in front of for that 10 minutes and not think about their everyday and not think about their kids or their stresses and get lost in the art in a meditation. And they don't even realize that they're meditating. So I think that's so beautiful.
Yeah. You know, I will say, New York holds a key in my life. My grandma was there in the city. And then I met someone that's one of my mentors, and this incredible soul that just works with the body to awaken Kundalini energy and source and all these things. And I did a session with him, and then I decided to just, New York City, I'd always just meander after I had time. It was my space.
Best city for wandering.
Best city for wandering. And I went to the Guggenheim Museum, and there was a small exhibition of a collection of paintings from Joseph Albers from his time in Mexico. And there was this one painting I just stood in front of, and for the first time, so Joseph Albers works with colors and planes, and I was able to walk into his painting. It was this experience of like, it was the being in front of a painting and being in that meditative space, as opposed to, you know, when I often look at paintings, it's like, oh my gosh, look at that beautiful brushstroke. Look at how they did that, the dress with the lace and the this and like the technique. And this, Joseph Albers is you could say abstract art. And he's working with planes and dimension. And it really awakened and unlocked something in me of, that's what I want. That's what I want to share with my paintings. And I'm doing it in my own way. From my sacred scroll.
From your sacred scroll. So here at the Sanctuary, our tagline is live a life aligned. You have touched upon it, but how do you live your life aligned? What are your daily practices to keep you aligned?
Well, we touched upon the breath.
Yes.
And just the every second of breath, right? And the daily practices, I'll say, I love my hot matcha in the morning. That's a moment for me. And still to this day, I'm like, my son likes his coconut water and his little nuke. And I'm like, buddy, it's my matcha time. My daily rituals is motherhood. And then it's carving out the time for art. There's still the practice of yoga. There's nothing like being in breath and movement. And also the physicality of actually just using weights and training muscles. I think as we get older, we start to recognize the importance of that and that stability. The days where I do get to do a ritual, the day where, you know, I'll plant a plant with my son as intention of like, this is going to go, we have a balcony right now and I call it our balcony garden. And that garden has specifically been intended for the home and the garden that we're going to have. And that's now starting to embody. And so there are these spaces in my everyday where there's ritual and then there's more ceremonial pieces of like, okay, let's intentionally plant this plant with this intention in it. And really life has become ceremony. And there's just this bliss in the everyday and in connecting with other humans and just hearing what they have to share and still moving through it. You know, we had a slight conversation before we started of family and things moving through. And again, for me, it's like there's a state of being and presence. There's a love and a devotion. I can't say, and I don't know if it's everyone's path. And I don't know if we can force that through anyone. And I do know if you're here, it is your path. If you're listening to this, there's something inside of you. And just as we said, some people might show up to yoga for the physical, and then eventually more comes up. There's a seed inside of us all that knows God. And I say God now with full presence. For me, it's, you know, we can say the universe, we can say different things. We say
Creator, source.
Yeah, whatever that energy is, I think God is more all-encompassing,
Yeah.
right? And that's why I like that word. For us, it's Hashem, and Hashem is beyond the name.
But it's all, as you and I feel, an embodiment of one energy, of one source. So it's wherever you connect to, it's all the same. We all come from it, you know?
Yes. I would love to just touch on one last thing with everything that's happening now in the world, which is, you know, for a while I was doing all these plant medicines and singing these hymns from other cultures. And at a certain point, I was like, oh my gosh, it's all here in Judaism. And I was born into this path. And a friend of mine was like, have you read the book, The Jew and the Lotus? He's like, it's all about this guy that was studying Buddhism. And he finally got there. And at the end of this process, his teacher said, but you were born a Jew and that's your path. And not to dismiss him into
I need this book.
Buddhism, right? And I haven't read the book, so I need to read it before I fully quote it. But whatever was shared with me was just knowing what I was born into, knowing what I chose. Again, like this was the energy that I chose. So let me work with this. And then that got me more curious about Judaism and learning like that there's all these, you know, the angels that are connected to the north and south and east and west, and you know, where in other cultures it might be like the jaguar and these energies, we have it within our culture. And then for people to say decolonization, right? And how people are stealing this information from other cultures, but then saying like, right now, you know, there's a presence in holding, like even to be able to talk about this at this point of Judaism, I'm working through emotions. There's emotions. You know, I was in a Jewish women's circle the other night on the beach and people were passing by and we were speaking and I was like, oh no, are they going to hear it? There's still some resonance that I'm like, okay, that's fear. Breathe through that. And the last point is the essence of fear. To me, fear is the unknown. Fear is not, it's like when you tune in, it's like, okay, what is this fear? I don't know. And I'm creating these stories of what could happen. Okay, let me just put my mindset into my heart and into this holy presence and into possibility and still discernment, knowing where we're supposed to be. Our body feels and like, this direction is not okay. I need to go this direction. You know, I need to turn the corner. I need to,
inner listening.
Yeah. But yeah, I'm really, thank you for the space to just share, and speak and open my heart. And I love you.
I love you too.
Yeah.
Thank you for, you know, I feel so blessed that it was your sister I met first, and I still am very close with her, and I love my relationship with both of you, but you really have been a pillar in my spiritual path. If I really look back, you know, there were such key places that you came in or brought me in. So thank you. And thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing with our audience. Thank you for being open and vulnerable and authentic. And we'll just play a little sound,
Please.
Which I have another tool is in my life because of Sharon. So Sharon, please share with our audience where they can find you. This hat is she created herself. What is your Instagram? What is the Substack? Like, where can people find you? Where are you teaching? Please.
Yes. I'd say Instagram is a great place to go, which is Galactic Dew, DEW. My middle name means saturated in dew. I have my website, SharonAluma.com. My Substack is at Sharon Aluma. If you probably search Sharon Aluma, there's only one other Sharon Aluma that exists on this planet right now that I know of. Okay. Yeah. Amazing.
Great.
Thank you so much.